Welcome aboard to the pilot episode of Wildstar Weekly, a weekly web show where we get down and dirty and talk about stuff going on in Wildstar. This is the pilot episode. I want to try out a new concept, see if you guys like it. If you do, there'll be plenty more of this to come. This is a show where I'm going to talk candidly about some things going on in Wildstar, be they current events like patches, or just something that's going on in game like a class or a trade skill or raids or dungeons or PvP or whatever. We're just going to talk about them, hash it out, have some discussion. It's going to be a good time. And I promise I'll try to be as funny as possible. But on with this grand Wildstar experiment, shall we? And on this very first episode, I want to talk about the launch! Because we are free to play, Lordy, we are free to play. But this launch has been nothing if not a little bit rocky. And I'm not talking Rocky 1, I'm talking full-on Rocky 4 shit. The Russians are coming, Carl Weathers is dead. Sadly, those brave newbies and returning vets are not quite seeing Nexus at her best. Wildstar's been having a little bit of problems with its launch. You got your usual suspects like server lag and disconnects, and those who made it through those got stuck with all sorts of weird little glitches, like the loading screen boss who would boot you back to character select whenever you hit a loading screen, or other little things like stalkers not being able to regenerate their suit power. All things considered, this launch has been pretty rough, and as with the internet, a lot of people are salty, and some of them are rightly so. This game the launch has not been the best. And that's coming from me. I'm a pretty vehement supporter of Carbine and Wildstar, if that weren't somewhat painfully obvious by the fact that I am doing a weekly show about Wildstar. But it's a time to burn everything to the ground, annihilate Nexus and abandon it. Leave it to the dogs and allow it to rot away in darkness? Absolutely fucking not. Because quite frankly, this is not the worst MMO launch I've ever seen. In fact, this isn't even the worst Wildstar launch I've ever seen. And let me just quickly clarify something, because a lot of people have been saying, well, technically this is not a launch. This isn't a launch. What the fuck? This isn't a launch. And you're absolutely correct. This is not technically a launch. But when hundreds of thousands of people begin bombarding a server that is not necessarily prepared for it, nor has ever dealt with hundreds of thousands of people at the same time bombarding it, it doesn't matter if it's a launch, if it's a relaunch, or if it's Tuesday, your server is getting butt-fucked the same way. So I'm just gonna use the term launch because it's pretty much the same thing. So at midnight on the 29th, the Wildstar free-to-play system went live, and was almost immediately bombarded with character creation glitches, massive lag, and enormous entry queues. It was like going to Disneyland on a Saturday, only when you got on the rides, they were going like 2 miles an hour. It was the worst. I know because I was streaming at the time. And I basically streamed about an hour and a half of staring at my stupid Chewa's stupid face and character creation. Oh, don't worry, I'm only kidding. You're my adorable hairball of destruction. A bit intense, and those with heart problems might want to step away, because things are getting crazy here. I mean, look at all of this going on right now. So with nigh on unplayable lag, some pretty nasty queues, and a myriad of interesting bugs, what the hell was Carbine to do? And they did what they should have. They pounded away at it. By about halfway through the second day, they'd solved a lot of these problems and things were getting better, but new ones started cropping up. Things like the loading screen boss, which nicely booted you back to character selection every time you tried to enter a loading screen, which I don't know if you know this, is a lot. Now, I don't want to give out the wrong impression. I might sound like I'm irritated and angry and salty, but I'm not, because this is pretty much just your standard MMORPG launch. And yes, it's not a launch, but it is pretty much the same thing as a launch. Come on, we're arguing semantics here. Come on! See, I've been playing MMORPGs for the better part of the last 10 years at this point. I am an old bastard. I've been playing everything from little flash-in-the-pan indie games like World of Warcraft to the big AAA developments like MapleStory. There's some serious MMOing going on here, but this is nothing new. What's happened to Wildstar over the last couple of days is pretty much your standard popular mainstream MMORPG launch. Lags, server disconnects, interesting bugs, all sorts of stuff. Anytime an MMORPG comes out, an MMORPG expansion comes out, or if that MMORPG happens to be sufficiently large enough, a big content patch hits, you see this same shit. And you see the same shit from the community as well. People crying doom and gloom, threatening to cancel their subscriptions, claiming it's the end of the world. But it never is, because if a bad launch killed an MMORPG, there would be no MMORPGs. Except for like Rift apparently, but Rift. Am I saying it's okay to have a shitty launch? No, you should be prepared. You should be ready to take things on. but what means more than having a bad launch is how the company reacts to it. And I think Carbine has really shown their true colors with their reaction to this launch. Because it is Saturday, October 3rd, only about 5 days after launch, and a lot of these issues have disappeared. Not entirely. Some of them still crop up. We still get lag spikes and the occasional person stuck in the dreaded login loop. But a lot of these issues have been disappearing. And why is that? Because Carbine has dug in their heels. They've done pretty much the only thing they can do. They've been digging in and making sure these bugs get dealt with as quickly as possible, which is definitely admirable. It is certainly not over yet, though, and there are still some connection issues, especially when you're doing dungeons. But don't worry, because unlike the original Wildstar launch, which had a lot of problems, which I've detailed before, this launch is not broken, because Wildstar is a really good game. Once these ephemeral problems are dealt with, Wildstar will still be fun. That's the great thing about this free-to-play launch, and why Wildstar is not going away. Why this isn't the end of the world. Why a bad launch is not going to kill this game. Because there's always that ability to go back and dive back into the game once these problems have been solved. If you can't take it right now, take a couple of days. Don't worry, Nexus is still going to be waiting for you when you get back, and it'll be waiting for you without any of the problems. Or you can endure what's happening right now, the lag spikes and the issues, but it'll be worth it because Wildstar is a very fun game. And once these server issues and lag spikes have been dealt with, well, that's what we're going to be left with. A very, very fun game. So my message to the brave newbies and the returning vets, hang in there. It might be a little bit choppy right now. It's gotten a lot better since the beginning, but there's still a lot of love here, and this game is still definitely worth your time. And very soon, it won't be taking up tons of it by waiting in loading screens and bullshit lag and stuff like that. Because one day, somebody's going to be complaining in your guild about their connection problems, and you're going to tell them the story of the Wildstar launch and how horrifying it was. But it will be in the past, ancient history. But that's all for today's episode of Wildstar Weekly. We'll be back next week with some other inane shit to talk about for Wildstar. Until then, you should post in the comments about what you'd like to hear about Wildstar. I'm happy to talk about all sorts of things, and I would love to get your opinions and talk to you about what you think of the Wildstar free-to-play launch, or what you think I should cover next week. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and always remember, my fellow Nexians, don't stand in the red!